Hey
There we
guys.
go.
Okay.
Hi.
We're live. We're on.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Julia.
Hey.
Who's that in the background?
That's
That's
George.
George.
That's George. We're over at their boarding facility where all the 3 Cane Corsos are housed right now and being monitored and watched and fed. So we're hanging out with the 3. We've been giving them extra feedings and monitoring their food, and we're here today doing that again. And I'd like to be able to show you. There's Stevie.
Oh,
still,
yeah. Let me,
they're still really scared. There's Stevie, and then Stevie's coming out for a snack.
Stevie,
Guys, hi,
a boy
Stevie.
or a girl?
Stevie is the boy of the bunch. So Stevie's just checking me out, wants to know why I'm hanging out with George, and trying to see if I can get George to come out and say hello. There's a lot going on here. There's other dogs here, so they're getting acclimated.
And then where's Gracie?
Gracie is in the one right next to Stevie, but she's inside right now. She was out a little while ago. Maybe if I shake the bowl, she'll come back out. We do have them separated. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that right now. It definitely helps us monitor their feeding first and foremost, because otherwise George would eat all their food.
Yeah.
So we've got them in 3 kennels all next to each other, and they're just hanging out. We're letting them decompress after everything they've been through. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. There's some really good music that's playing in the background. I don't know if you can hear that, but they're being treated to some classical music while they're here as well.
I hear that, and I hear a bird that's trying to sing along.
There are some birds, that's for sure. It's probably the closest environment they can get to what they were in. They have this outdoor environment here as well as their indoor enclosures. So
Yeah. So speaking of which, the reason we're here, right? So we have Joanne DeCalvis and Mike Noon, and you guys did this huge rescue of these 3 mastiffs out of the Angeles Forest, right, or National Forest?
Yes, correct.
So, can you tell us what happened, say, from start to finish? I mean, how did you find out about them? Were people alerting both of you? What's the play-by-play? Like, this is a huge undertaking and huge commitment.
It is. It was, and it's still ongoing. Yeah, we got contacted. The way this originally went down is it was all social media. We actually got tagged in some posts for one of the girls, Veronica, who initially saw the dogs on the turnout in a highway way up, 16 miles up Angeles Crest Highway in the middle of nowhere. So she had seen them, reached out to a couple of her friends, Heather and Miles, and these 3 were desperately trying to find someone to help them get these dogs off the mountain and get them sold. So we got contacted. We would be Dog Days.
Okay, Dog Days.
Dog Days. Yeah, Dog Days was contacted, and she sent us a couple of pictures, told us where the location was. We knew they were in dire straits because there's no way these 3 dogs would have been up there by themselves. So we organized a plan to go up, assess what was going on, what we were dealing with, and we also knew there were a couple of storms coming. That was Stevie. He just came out for a little snack. Gracie's down there, out now, if you can see her.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Gracie girl. Hi, Gracie. And Stevie, they're just doing their thing. So we were contacted to just go see what we were dealing with down there. So we also had a storm coming, a couple of storms coming the next day. So we knew we had one day to get up and put up some shelter for them, because there was 3 storms. They were going to be snowstorms, first of all, and some rain. You can see, come here, bud. They're scaring themselves right now. Gracie's out. Hi, Gracie. Hi, baby girl. So we had to see what we were dealing with. So we put up some equipment together really as fast. We took a couple of crates. We took some materials that we could use to make them shelter, some tarps, and we set something up in the cold very quickly the next day. And that was the start of it.
And were you and Mike already working together on this, or what was the?
We were not yet working together, I don't think, Mike.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I had seen at one point, because I had been tagged to them as well, and I had seen the dog days, and Joanne was, actively involved. And I think at one point I just reached out and I said, "Hey, what's up with the dogs up there?" And we just started talking from then. Yeah, that was the beginning of the fun.
Yeah, I think once we got up there, we realized the magnitude of what we were dealing with. The terrain was extreme. The weather was going to be extreme. The location was extreme. We had no cell service up there. We had no cell service for miles. So everything we had to do, we had to prepare for. In emergencies, we would have to travel quite a ways. If we forgot something, it would take a while to get it. So we had to be really prepared and coordinate that. And we immediately just, gave them shelter and started feeding them while we worked up a plan. So basically, during the bad weather, we made sure they were fed, we made sure they had water, and we made sure they were safe. And when the snow came, as soon as the snow cleared, we knew they were in more danger because that highway up there is really a fast highway. It's got a 55-mile speed limit right where they are. So we had to keep them safe. That was next on our agenda. In doing all of this, we actually found out there were other people feeding them. And one of the ways we found that out is there was a log sheet that was put into a box that was hung on a tree up one of the ravines. So we knew someone else had been feeding them. And Veronica put down her information when she went up there, and she was able to find out who that person was. So when we contacted that person, it turned out it was Colin from the Montrose Search and Rescue Team. And they had also gotten calls about the dogs. So they had gone out there and they were leaving food and water for them as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that in and of itself, when I heard that, I was like, damn, that's awesome. I mean, to leave a log sheet to let people know, hey, they've been fed today, don't worry about them. Or,
right?
Hey, nobody's been here. If you feed them, please put your name down. I fed them at this time. I'm like, damn, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I've never seen that done before.
That was brilliant.
Come to find out, a search and rescue group was actually who started that. And I'm like, yeah, figures.
Right? Yeah.
Awesome.
Good tip for us, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But those guys usually don't deal with, they deal with everything, but animals per se isn't.
No, they do some animal rescues. If an owner and an animal were stuck somewhere, they could probably get in and help them for sure. But in this case, they couldn't secure the dogs.
Right.
So we couldn't really get them out because they couldn't secure them, which is where our expertise came into play. And then one of the reasons I reached out to Mike, because I knew this was a lot bigger than just us. We needed all the expert advice we could get on this. And Mike has, great tracking skills and tracking skills, and we needed to really assess the situation completely to keep them safe and put the best plan into place. So we did contact Colin, and we made communication with them, let them know that we were there to help, and he was super appreciative, said his team was appreciative that we were there to take on that part of this task. And he actually has a friend at Caltrans who has been totally overlooked in this whole thing, but he's got a connection with some guys at Caltrans, and I had put some cones out in the turnout to keep people away from the turnout. I didn't want the general public pulling in the turnout because they may scare the dogs, spook the dogs, unknowingly.
Chase the dogs.
Yeah, chase the dogs. I mean, people don't know. Even good intention people could actually scare them into danger. Right. And we didn't want anyone touching the equipment. At this point, we had put up other game cameras in the area to monitor them, to see what they were doing, where they were going. So Caltrans brought out some cones, some really good ones, and we quarantined off that whole turnout for the whole month, basically, starting from April 5th, I believe. We had that whole turnout just completely shut down to anybody but us, which was a huge factor in keeping the dogs safe.
So when were you first alerted to the dogs?
We were first alerted, I want to say it was April 4th. I mean, we were up there in a day. It was right around there. And Veronica, I think, had been feeding them, since the 27th. Mm-hmm. She had spotted them since the 27th, and I think Caltrans had spotted them or been told about them the 24th or maybe a week prior. And we just found out today from some Forest Service personnel that they said they've been up there for 10 weeks, which would be the longest time that we were made aware of.
And then I know, so I went up with Mike one day, just as I call myself the car puppy. I'm just the ride along girl. Mike, when did we go up there?
I don't even remember.
You were putting in a plan. It was on a Saturday, but.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's when we realized we needed to, we realized after we created the initial shelter for them and we gave them some protection, they were going into it maybe, here and there, but I don't think they ever really slept in it. We had put up our humane traps like we would normally do, and they were very skittish. They did not want to go into the traps or near the traps. They wanted the food, they were hungry, but they didn't want to go in the traps. And we tried that several times where we actually set the traps, we monitored it to see if we could catch them, and that was going to be a no-go. And we knew then it was going to take a longer period of time to secure them. And because the terrain was so uneven, we had two options. One was do it in the turnout, put up something that we could catch them in the turnout, or go find a higher location for Mike's plan that we talked about. And Mike, you can talk about that. This gigantic, probably the biggest ever made Misty trap known to man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's get back a little bit to the trap, the physical trap itself. So when I went up there, I mean, one of the things that I saw was we have a trap down in the ravine, and it has been placed in an open position where it is not going to actually trip. So it's what we would consider kind of a trap training type of a position. So there's no way it's going to fall on them or anything. We want to just put the food in the back and that sort of thing, and let the dogs get comfortable and desensitize them to it, get them to the point where they want to walk in freely and eat. And it's a pretty common thing to do when you're dealing with skittish or scared dogs. And I mean, that was done beautifully. And then I remember looking up and seeing we've got, 2 pallets up there, and we've got 3 crates, and we've got blankets and tarps and stuff over the crate. And I'm like, damn, all right, we got this, it's starting to get set up. But when I reviewed video and was given video footage and still images of George in particular, basically approaching the trap, her eyes were 100% focused on that door. She knew something was up, and
Yeah.
oftentimes I joke around and I say, yeah, these dogs were mechanical engineers in their past life, and somehow they figure this stuff out, but George in particular was the one that got elected to go get nailed by this trap by the others. But I also knew that at one point, like, if we could get George in and out comfortably where George felt good, she would go back and report to the others that, yeah, it's okay, the thing's okay. But once I went up there and I engaged a little bit, by that time Joanne had George basically eating out of her hand, very similar to this, only it wasn't quite as comfortable. George would go up and just grab a bite and then kind of bolt backwards a little bit. But with all the hours that Dog Days actually spent out there, and just sitting with them and engaging with them and getting their trust and that sort of thing, it made it a lot better. So when I went up there, I could get George within 6 feet of me. So nowhere near as close as these guys, but first day, not bad. Ultimately ended up seeing, Joanne had pointed out that there used to be an older feeding spot that was halfway up the hill. So when we walked up there, all 3 of them were there. And all of them were within probably about 15 feet of me or so, that sort of thing. But one of the things that I did, and Joanne and I talked about a little bit, was have you guys walked up and above and beyond to see the extent of their travels? Because it had just snowed. So the snow is perfect for tracking because there's nothing else walking out there. So if you can get to a position where your face is in the wind and they're ahead of you, they can't smell you. The sound is also suppressed because of the wind. And you can get to a much higher point and look down to find out the extent of their patterns or roaming patterns. So you'll know where they go. And at that time, when I got up there, the snow had melted. The ground was still soft. It had rained, I think, after the snow. And I could see, I hiked up around the backside of the mountain and went up kind of a tougher ravine, but came across this spot that I thought was really good. And sure enough, there were prints there. Now, we didn't know whether the prints had been there before the snow or after the snow, but I knew they'd been there. And there was also a rope toy that was up there. That was it Stevie, the thief that just stole everything.
Stevie stole everything. Stevie steal anything.
Yeah.
Tickets, poles, You know, for anybody that's watching this, you know, we're feeding them by hand because we're trying to condition them to, you know, be comfortable with us. And that's why we're doing this. This is just, they've already had a meal this morning. This is another meal. But we're just trying to get them comfortable. You can see they're still skittish. I mean, she's still skittish, you know. And this is George, for everybody watching. George, if you're looking at George's eye, George does have cherry eye. It is not necessarily a big deal. It does require surgery. It is common in some breeds. So she will have her surgery that will heal that, and she won't even know she had it. She'll be brand new once that happens.
Yep.
She can see really well, actually. She knows we're here. She sees everything out of that eye.
Yeah.
And her food. And what her eyes don't see, her nose smells. She's the sniffer of the bunch.
Yeah. Yeah, she was definitely the one that was the forefront, and kind of whatever she felt comfortable with, the others would adapt to.
Correct.
You know, and Gracie was always the one that was probably the least receptive to approaching. You know, she was always in the background doing her little huffing and puffing and barking and that kind of stuff. And
she's poking her head out down there just a little bit. She's eating out of your hand down there too. Just quieting so you guys can see Gracie down there. And so Gracie's, you know, she was the second one to eat out of our hands. And she's the alpha female. So she...
how do we get them up there? You know, how do we get them from the ravine at the road to a position probably, I don't know, Joanne, what would you think? Maybe about 500, 600 feet difference in elevation?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Maybe somewhere between a quarter and a half a mile.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
up hills, steep.
So yeah, steep hills. So I mean, one of the things that I saw was that when we approached them and up the ravine, they would take off in a very specific direction, two different directions. One was back to a log that they would kind of hide behind, but the other was up the hill. So once we combine that natural, I'm going to escape this way, to a place that we already knew were prints, we knew it wouldn't be a big stretch to get them back up there where they had been before. We just had to look at George.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but Stevie just stole the toy. We brought him toys specifically so he'd feel at home. And he stole it. It's back in the door of his, you can't really see it, but it's at the door of his little thing, right in there. And it was way out there.
That's one thing they kept doing up there, right? You put bowls and they take them. They had a little treasure trove.
And the blankets.
Bowls, the blankets. Yeah, we had game cameras going on at night too, so we'd see what they were doing at night. We knew where they were sleeping, and he would rearrange all the blankets, all the water bowls, the food bowls. It would be like a Easter egg hunt every time we got there, wondering where everything was, and we'd have to find it or bring extras just in case. Even towards the last 2 days, they actually took the water jugs, the full water jugs that we were leaving up there. We found 2 of those. There's Gracie.
Yeah, they're knuckleheads.
Yeah, what a good girl, Gracie. And yeah, even here, their personality is still the same. When George comes out to eat, Stevie feels more comfortable coming out. It's the same thing here.
Yeah,
like on the mountain.
Yeah, the same. Like the same dynamics.
I know we're rambling. Hopefully, we're not rambling.
No, I mean, I just had a big picture of the dogs just coming out. So as Mike's talking and you guys are telling the story, you know, they're providing plenty of visual.
Yeah, and this was similar behavior on the mountain where they would peek around the corners. They'd come out from behind the trees. They'd come out and look at us, and they'd back away real quick. And
real low crouching, like
way crouching, like crouching tiger crouching. Yeah. We have some images of them reaching for the water they were so scared of everything. And, you know, they would just crouch and reach with their little back legs, you know, because they were so scared.
And that was the thing too, that when I went up on top and I'm looking, and at that point I'm listening to them barking and I'm trying to orient myself, because we're hiking up the backside of a mountain, everything kind of looks very similar, and canyons and trees, they look different from different angles and that sort of thing. So I'm getting an orientation of where exactly they are in relation to where Joanne was still engaging with them down below. But it was hard to say really how far I was from that point, you know, from that vantage point anyway. But when we came down, I mean, at one point I know we talked a lot about given a couple of hours, I probably could have used a snare on George. I
Right.
think George was so bold. I think I could have gotten to the point where, Joanna is, with holding your hand out, and I could have probably popped a snare on it. But the signal that would have sent to the others would have been horror. They would have been shocked, because I guarantee it, George would have been flailing around, would have been just horrific scene, maybe howling, screaming, whatever, even though snares don't hurt dogs at all. But it would send a message to the other two that these guys aren't to be trusted anymore. And now, okay, we got one. What about the other two?
And I think,
Now we just blew
Yeah.
weeks worth of effort that Joanna and her crew had been putting into it. And, there's no way we can do that. And the same thing could be said about the traditional traps.
correct.
By that time, they had put so much effort into feeding them at very specific places in the trap and moving it forward. And finally, George was seen in the trap. And then Stevie was next. And then I think Gracie was ultimately seen in there as well. So now we've got all three of them in the traps, but you're not going to trap one and then the next and then the next when you have three highly fearful dogs. And sometimes when we have two dogs, we'll trap one and we'll leave that one in the trap and we'll set a second trap. And sometimes we'll even cover that trap. The only way you can see your buddy is to crawl into the second trap and bam, there you go. But we've got three. It's not going to happen. So we can't take that approach. And even if you lined all three traps up, there's no way you could guarantee all three of them to go in the trap at the same exact time. But if you're a dog and you see your buddy all of a sudden panicked and they're freaking out inside of a trap, I guarantee it, you're not going in one, and you might even run. And if we left one of them out there, now that one's hugely at risk and a lot more difficult to ever even think about trying to capture in any other means, because they can maneuver those mountains quick, even on flat ground. I mean, a human is no match for a dog in speed. You're just not going to get them. So it had to be this way. It just worked out, and we'd all talked about it and agreed that Missy Trap, which is basically just a huge chain link enclosure, was the only way we were going to get all three of them at the same time.
Yeah, and I was really afraid of that road, Mike. I mean, I was afraid
of
any of those scenarios that one would run out into that highway. More than anything, I think that's what I was fearful of. Because you see the motorcycles, you see the car clubs, they're coming up there really fast around those corners. And that turnout, even that whole corner was race cars. You couldn't see them around the corner if they were in the road, and we had them on camera. We knew they were venturing out into the turnout pretty close to the highway. So. We were scared about that the whole time we were up there. Every day we went up, we were like, please let the barriers be up and please let the dogs be safe, and have not gotten hit the whole time.
Right.
They're up there.
The one video in particular I remember seeing was George wandering out into the middle of that turnout. And like you said, the next step is to cross the road. And I think I remembered telling you they're ready to go home, which means, they'd been there for a while. They realized, man, this sucks. Yeah, we got people feeding us, but this sucks. They're ready to go look for something else, something better. And that was the most nerve-wracking thing to me, is you lose one, man, or if they start moving, now what? We know where they are, but if they start moving, they're gone, and they're not going to survive. By the time we find them again, it's going to be too hard.
Oh God, the speed with which people, the motorcycles and that Lamborghini that kept coming around that one day.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
there were accidents and cars or motorcycles down or over the road. Many times we went up there. I mean, the search and rescue guys were busy even when we went up there.
Right?
Yeah, they were busy. So that then entered the next step, which was, we got to get the Missy Trap up. We had to find a place, and Mike scouted that place out for us. And we then knew that we had to get a whole lot of equipment up a very steep hillside that was dangerous. Not only was it steep and sand where you would lose your grip on the steepness, but along the whole trail all the way to the top were these prickly bushes that had like 2-inch thorns. So we had to be really careful in doing that. The whole time
it was starting to warm up too, so snakes were an issue. Now we didn't see any, but the potential was there.
We went into snow, ice, and then we went into the heat, which was bringing out, snakes.
So let's just, I want to just spotlight, because for you guys, this is the normal thing, but a lot of people don't realize the back end work. Like you guys are talking about some of the back end work that goes into it, but the whole thing about the amount of people you had to organize, the amount of people that have to be to work well together and cohesively, the plan that's going to work for 3 dogs in given all the circumstances, and then come up with the idea of a missy trap. And then you guys had people drive out to Joanne's house, right, and set everything up and test it beforehand.
We did.
There's so much that went into it, testing the door, testing new equipment, doing a run through, because there's no room for error on that mountain.
Right.
Yeah, even the logistics of the feeding, the distances that we traveled. Now, I went up 3 times. It was 76 miles each way for me. But Dog Days had, basically taken shifts along with Veronica. So they were trading off. They were maintaining a schedule.
Yeah.
And Veronica was actually the closest, who lived kind of at the bottom of the hill. Maybe she's 20, 25 miles away, something like that. But everybody else was driving well over an hour. And like in my case, it was an hour and a half each trip up there.
Each way.
That's hard. Yes, each way. And so that's very, very difficult to manage and get the commitment. So on one hand, being under this, COVID lockdown was incredibly helpful, because we had the people that were available.
Right.
Otherwise they'd be at work. Right.
Right.
So, but on the other hand, it proved to be difficult in some ways too, because when you're hiking up a mountain and you don't normally do a lot of hiking and you've got this mask over your face, it's a little hard to breathe.
Yeah, we practiced that social distancing as much as we could. But we were hiking and we were driving. The nice thing was there was no traffic. I mean, there's that.
Yeah.
But we did. I mean, some people drove 70 miles each way to go up there. So a lot of people, and we couldn't carpool.
Right.
We couldn't carpool.
Right.
Because of the COVID. So we all had to take separate cars, and we actually had to park up the hill in another area and then walk down to the turnout. Like, you could only park 3 cars in the turnout, so we'd have to have people walk. And those dogs were on a feeding schedule every day. From the time we went up there to put up that shelter, from April 4th or 5th, those dogs were fed either by Veronica or our team. Every day someone drove up, gave fresh water, gave fresh food, checked all the game cameras, put new cards in the game cameras, and then went home and we checked all the footage. Hours of checking footage, by the way. That's a whole other thing that we did even behind the scenes that we weren't on the mountain for, although we did a lot of it up there. But we were checking the footage to see where they were feeding, what they were doing, who was doing it, who was going into the trap, maybe a little bit, who was going in more, who wouldn't go near it, all of those types of things.
And what about like other wildlife that you catch? Sorry, Mike.
No, that's okay. Yeah, Joanne, I think they got a fox on
oh, yes.
At one point, but nothing else.
Yeah, somebody asked about critters as well yesterday. It's like, we only had the fox. I mean, there were a couple of mice, but nothing else scary. So
and didn't the fox go all the way in the trap?
The fox went all the way into the trap more than once, but the first time the fox went in, it stole the bowl as well. It was like Stevie's buddy or something. It stole the bowl, and we knew it wasn't Stevie in that moment, but we had Stevie on camera for many other things that he stole. But the fox did go in and steal the bowl, which was
the interesting thing is too about the fox is that typically when we're dealing with wildlife, whether it's coyotes or fox or bobcat or anything like that, that would go in and be attracted to something like that. Those types of animals, when they get the whiff of human scent, they normally hold back and they'll avoid it. Sometimes they'll eat something that they can reach in real quick and grab and go, but they don't normally walk all the way in. Now, typically trappers that, basically go for that type of critter, they're handling everything with gloves or making sure that there is no human scent on the traps and, things like that. So I was actually really surprised this fox just went right in.
Yeah, it was a pretty bold fox for a fox that was 5,300 feet in elevation up a remote national part of the forest,
Yeah. I mean, I was hoping that that's actually would teach the others that were watching, like, hey, nothing happened. It's cool. Don't worry about it.
Right. So
but it didn't at first.
we got through all of that, and then it was okay. Now we have to take this missy trap that we set up, at my place just for practice. We have it all dialed in. We told the team what everybody was going to need to do, and we recruited some people to help us during that moment to come up the mountain with us. Basically last week. So last Wednesday, our team and Mike and Veronica, we went up and we put up 14 panels of 6x6 chain link fencing, and 2, 40 feet soccer nets that went up top. And we enclosed that and, you know, had to rig it all, make sure it was safe and that they would walk in and that they couldn't knock it down, that they couldn't escape out of it. Mike had to put his mechanisms in that would help remotely trigger the door. We had to run some wires and cables and batteries and things like that. And so we got it up, and it took us several hours. It was a very steep terrain. You probably saw some of those pictures. And that was just us getting it up there the very first day.
Yeah.
Try to see
The
if
interesting.
I could some pictures
Go
of
ahead.
that. I was going to try to see if I could share some pictures of that, but my photo's not wanting to open up. That would have
That's
been.
all right. We can always post
Yeah.
them in the
Yeah.
thread if we need
Sure,
to people
sure.
to see. There's so many, and the reason we're even having this conversation is there's so much footage, there's so much video, there's so much story to tell. It was just too much to even write down for people. A lot of people didn't even know where the story began, so I'm glad we started this the way we have, so people will have an understanding of the whole rescue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it was interesting too, because I know when we set up the trap basically at your place, I think we had 8 panels
Yeah, we did 8.
somewhere in that range.
We only did 8.
And you know, we walked into this, and yeah, you could house 3 dogs in there, but a dog's reaction time, especially a fearful dog's reaction time, when they hear the click of a gate starting to move or any kind of a noise that can scare them, because these guys, all 3 of these dogs are just very, very, very alert. I mean, to everything around them.
And
And
they're big.
so you have to have it large enough. And I remember telling the group, we're going to need a lot more panels than this. How many we got? And, you know, I said, I'd be comfortable with 18. What? You crazy? And
I thought you
I
were
don't
crazy.
know, you know.
You're making more work for us, Mike. We don't
I
need all
know,
that
I
extra
know.
work. Are you crazy? 18? He wants me to get more?
Yeah, I mean, I was telling her, I said, hey, just start scouring Craigslist and that, you know, and getting free panels or whatever you can pick up. We need it, you know. And it's
You were
always
right.
about being
You were right.
over prepared, you know.
Yeah.
And I have a pretty good sense of, you know, the spatial perception when I was up there, and I'm like, you know, okay, I kind of have a feeling. The cool thing was where we chose to set this was that there were natural pathways that their prints had been on, and yet interspersed in that was natural vegetation. So if we ran these panels in and amongst and encapsulated a lot of the vegetation in, if it came time to where when we entered this, you know, cage, this enclosure to catch them, we would have them running on these pathways as we pushed them, and they would be easier to manage and snare as they're trying to run by and that kind of thing, as opposed to, you know, a completely flat open area. And you know, it worked out. Now at some point we had to, you know, kind of thin the brush a little bit so that we could physically see through it to make sure that, because it was critical, we couldn't catch 2 and leave 1 out. We had to absolutely be certain all 3 were in that, you know, in that enclosure. And let me back up a little bit too, because we've used the term Missy trap. The Missy trap, under its definition and name, was invented essentially by a group called the Retrievers. So that in and of itself is not a new concept. It's a borrowed concept that is very commonly in use at this point. And in that particular trap, what they originally did was that they used a rope essentially to a trigger mechanism on the door that was kind of pulleyed over, and they had a hockey puck on it, and they would poke a hole through a stake or something and put that above the hockey puck, and the dog would tear at that and pull and basically trip the thing itself. They've reinvented things as they've gone by, and essentially now what they use is like a garage door sensor, one of those things that, you know, when somebody's still in the way, it won't close the door. So when a dog's head breaks that beam, it will release an electromagnet. So the problem with that is we've got 3, so we couldn't use that. So I've been developing something that behaves similar in concept. It releases the door, but it doesn't utilize that technology. It's a little different than that. But ultimately, I mean, quite honestly, even though I knew the system would work and I had a lot of confidence in it, I didn't have experience with it, real field experience with it. And there was no way I was going to allow my little system to be the thing that screwed all this separate up. So we actually tied paracord to the door, and I just kind of sat there and held it until I got the call with the radio to let it go.
Laying
Yeah.
down the brush. That's another thing that people didn't realize. They didn't realize that we were up there, that we had 6 people or 5 or 6 people.
Yeah, I think there's 5 people up there.
5 people up there. And we had, you know, Mike was laying down in the bushes on the ground. He didn't even have a visual on the dogs. So
Yeah, at first I was actually standing up, and I think it was Gracie. I mean, I could practically feel her breath from how close she was behind me, barking at me
oh, she was
because I was
pissed.
in.
Why were you
Oh
there?
yeah, yeah. I was like, dude, you're interfering. Now I'm 30 feet away from the trap or so, and Joanne on the Sunday before had called me up and said we had 5 people up there. We were doing our thing. We'd go inside. We'd scatter the food around. Um, and then we were out just kind of outside the trap, milling about, looking at, thinning brush and all that kind of stuff. And they all went in within 40 seconds. And that's when she's like, we got to go tomorrow if you're available. So I go, absolutely. So I was in a position that nobody else had been in. And I'm standing there with my back to them. So I figured, okay, that should do it. But apparently Gracie didn't like me there. So
No.
when we went in again for kind of round 2 feeding, that's when I said, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this point. Now, keep in mind, I'm holding a door back that has double thick rubber bungee cords on it that's under a lot of tension. If I move that door, if I relax my grip, and even though it's cutting into my hand, if I move at all and cause that door to move, we could blow the whole thing.
Right.
So while she went in, I went ahead and knelt down and was able to keep the same tension on the rope and all that kind of thing. So we got kind of lucky in that respect. But yeah. It was
radioing, coming, we were all walkie-talkie there with our earbuds and everything. And, we were radioing to each other the status of the dogs. Okay, one dog is in. We basically had a center point in the enclosure. There was a tree that Veronica carried up the hill, a dead tree that we used as kind of like a teepee with the nets. So it raised the nets up. It gave them a little more comfort walking in there. And that was our halfway point. We knew
that was really, it was kind of a twofold thing. It was to give a higher ceiling.
Yes.
But it was also for our safety because soccer nets will catch people just as well as they will dogs. So
True.
I don't need to be in there wrangling dogs and getting my head stuck on crap that's in my way when I've got maybe 3 highly fearful dogs that could be problematic when I'm working with them.
No, that's a good point. So we knew there was a certain point where we had to pull the trigger and basically say, okay, all 3 dogs are, past the tree. And, we had to come do it across the walkie-talkie, and we also gave Mike a visual. Another team member, Karen, gave him a visual at the same time to make sure he, heard it and saw it, that it was time to let that door fly.
Yeah, and even before that happened, our original plan in the meeting that we had down at the base where we all parked was, we need to be understanding that we're dealing with 3 very large, highly fear-based dogs. They are terrified. And several things can happen. The biggest problem that I could foresee was them digging out, and we could not obviously come up the mountain with this massive team because that would literally scare the crap out of them.
Right.
So because Joanne, we had been talking, and the way that they had done everything and engaged with them and interacted, they had so much trust. Now, the first day that we set up this trap, we had the door open. Joanne and Veronica sat in the very, very back, and they were throwing food to all the dogs. And George, being George, the leader of the pack kind of thing, he would, or she would not cross that threshold. She would not walk in there when they were in there.
Right.
And there was a mountain of food in there. So we gave up after 45 minutes, maybe something like that. Right. And we just decided, okay, look, they know it's there. They watched us all day long from probably 30 feet away assemble that thing for them. They had no idea what it was, obviously. But now they know there's nothing but food in it. And I think the cameras showed that they were in there a lot that night. So once we left, they were in. And so Joanne and her crew, basically, they kept on going up there, and it was a very regimented but casual feel to the process. And that was, you go in, you scatter food around, you go out, you start thinning bushes, you go to the vantage point where I was going to be to make sure that you could see exactly all the way through, to make sure that you're not going to miss any dog. A dog can't be hiding behind a bush or too close to the door. And then you go back in again and you give them a little bit more food. So the more times that you can get them in and out of that threshold, the more comfortable they become. And the more that they know that when they're in there, you're not going to screw with them.
Right.
So as long as you give them space. So they did, a beautiful job at managing that and getting them in there, getting them comfortable. And it was all of that work leading up to this, all of that hand feeding engagement and all that down below that really enabled this, payoff at the top. So, but the plan was that we had to potentially snare them and push them to run along the fence line and snare them as we go in, because we're going to do things as safely for the people involved as well as for the safety of the dogs. And we had paired up snares and catch bowls all the way around the enclosure.
Yeah.
I had my set was going to be going in. We tried that for a minute when the door closed, and they just were starting to freak. But bottom line is we had the group that was there. We were to call them to come down to the turnout. We were going to capture the dogs. We were going to then transfer them into a trap, wire that trap shut, because these traps are designed that if you do get wildlife in them, if you turn them upside down, the door just automatically falls open and the wildlife can get out and you're behind it and you're safe and all that kind of. Bobcats are especially nasty in that respect. But we needed to make sure that in the transport down the mountain, these things didn't drop and roll and then we lose the dog, because then we're screwed. That dog's screwed. So the plan was to, get them in there, hopefully let them settle, and then, secure them inside and then get them into traps and then start getting them down the hill once all three of them were completely secured. And all this was going to be done by radio. So,
And we prepared for the worst.
Yeah, we really had to. And I had to make sure that everybody understood what they saw. If we catch a dog on a catch bowl and that dog starts biting the catch bowl out of fear and it bites its own tongue and lips and stuff like that, they're going to bleed a lot. And there's going to be loudness and they're going to be flipping around and rolling. And it's a scary thing to watch. Right. But it's not truly a harmful thing to the dog. I mean, it sucks. Don't get me wrong, it sucks. But compared to what happens if we do nothing, those little mouth wounds will heal up very, very quickly. And we know we're going right to that anyway. So I don't worry about those kinds of things. I worry about car bumpers and disease and predators much more so than than that kind of stuff.
Well,
but we
didn't want any blood
fully understand.
We didn't want any blood anywhere from anybody.
Exactly.
Speaking of that, the dogs really did good for us. They were scared. I mean, some people have asked, what did they do when you shut the door? They ran around in circles. They rushed the fence. They did jump out. They were definitely panicked and stressed out, but they did calm down, shortly after that. And we were calm. We were all very calm up there. We didn't rush the fence. We walked up very slowly. We got down very low, let them do their thing, and we waited till they got calm. And it didn't take very long for them to just succumb to that. And all three basically curled up right next to each other in one pile.
In a dog pile.
In a dog pile. And that was that. And that's when we knew meanwhile, this whole time, to back up a little bit, once we knew that this plan was going to work, we had to figure out how to get them down the hill. It was going to be steep. We were going to have to put them into traps to transport them. And we knew what that, terrain was like. So I had reached out to Colin the Thursday night before. And I was like, Colin, we can get them. We can do it. We've got it. It's going to work. But we really need some help getting them down so that it's safe for everybody. Can you help? And he was like, absolutely. And he talked to the team lead and, they put a plan together shortly after that, and said, hey, let us know when it becomes an issue, let us know. And we let them know and they were prepared. And and
I think Colin went up there with you on Sunday, didn't he? And kind of scoped everything out and said, oh yeah, this is a piece of cake.
He did scope it out, and he had been up there previously earlier, in the month, when he had been feeding them prior. But he hadn't been all the way up the mountain, so he hadn't been up the steep hill. So he came out, took a look at it, said this is not a problem. We'll make this happen. We've got the gear. We can handle this, and they did. So the minute the dogs were in the enclosure, we had other team members positioned below that were prepared to come up. We still had a lot of equipment to bring up the hill. We had 3 more traps that had to be carried up the hill. So, our team members, there were a lot of team involved in this that had showed up. There were at least 14 of us and I think 13 on the Montrose Search and Rescue team. So we had upwards of 25 people there for this rescue on Monday. And we carried up the rest of the equipment carefully. The search and rescue guys got their pulley system into place for the steep ravine parts. And we basically got the dogs put into the crates, the traps that we were going to transport them in safely, one by one. Mike was instrumental in helping us do that so that they got in there as safely and calmly as they could. And then we would secure those dogs shut and then open that enclosure door. And right there was, that amazing looking stretcher with a giant wheel on the bottom that was going to get them down with 4 search and rescue guys from Montrose safely. They were going to make sure these dogs got down safely.
Yeah.
And they did that. And that was an extraordinary feat. But they got him down, got him to the pulley system, lowered him back down to the bottom where the rest of our team was waiting to take them. And you know, it was hot that day. Dogs were overheating. The dogs were stressed. So we, you know, we had to keep them cool. We, you know, kept them hydrated and cooled off and kept them out of the sun as much as we could. So we had, you know, we were really keeping them safe.
Yeah, each one of the traps was actually lined with a blanket. Once they got on there, we just basically poured some water on them. And then beyond that, we went ahead and wet down the towel and put that over the top of the trap to keep them out of the sun, because they were definitely doing a lot of panting. The panting was a lot of stress, but it was also the heat. So, and you know, and in the video of these dogs being transported down, from the moment that they settled and kind of fell into their dog pile, everything was calm. And we were so fortunate. Had this been a complete rodeo inside, it would have been horrible. And we just got lucky. And with the team, everybody understanding, hey, just get down, just give them a minute. We don't need to rush this. They're in there, they're safe, they're not going anywhere. We could take all day and we're good. So there's no point in just jumping in and you know, wrangling them. So we got really, really lucky that they settled all together. And even more so when we started applying catch poles to each one of them, they didn't put up a fight. They didn't try to run and bolt. And because the fear was that if one bolted, all of a sudden all three of them were going. And they were very calm. They just kind of submitted to the whole thing. And on the ride down the hill, they were calm, not a single bark. And we got them down to the turnout down below, kept them in the shade, you know, as one by one, you know, we're lowered down. I look back at this whole thing and the amount of planning, the amount of discussions between the team, between all the people involved, the logistics, it was amazing. It went beautifully, except one thing, and that was one of the girls fell before she ever even got up there and broke her wrist.
Yeah, one of our teammates was reaching to get some equipment out of the truck down at the bottom, like right when we were capturing them. And unfortunately, the ground was really uneven, and she fell. And the angle in which she fell, she broke her wrist pretty badly. Thankfully, you know, the Montrose search and rescue people were there, and you know, we also had, you know, nurses.
Medics on standby.
We have medics on standby, and we have two nurses, you know, Christine Sebastian on our team, who were also on hand. So we had good care, and the Montrose team, you know, treated her, you know, gave her some oxygen. I mean, she was in a lot of pain. And then we had to, you know, release her and another teammate that, you know, was with us. Ron was with us, who was, you know, manpower as well. But we had to let him take her down the hill to urgent care so she could get tended to. And she did break her wrist pretty good. She's got a full cast on right now up to her shoulder. And we're just praying that it stays and it doesn't move, so that she doesn't have to have surgery. So. Yeah. So we did have that happen, you know, which is, you know, never good. You don't want anybody to get hurt.
Wasn't there something else though that was happening right at the same time?
Oh yeah, right when that happened, the Montrose guys were in the turnout, and this woman came running down the hill, and she was like, help, you know, I need some help. And there was a man who was running down, and he had just dislocated his shoulder. In the middle of the mountain on the road. He was, I guess, on one of those scooters with his son or something up the road, and another turnout way up ahead of us. And he had, I guess, dislocated his shoulder, and he was in pain. So they attended to him as well. And this was all happening as we were triggering the door. And you know, really trying to calm the dogs down. And, you know, so a lot of precarious things. We could hear across, you know, the radios, and stuff was happening, and we were like, oh, here we go.
And in the sheriff's department, being the sheriff's department, they're organized, ready to roll. They want to come up there and get this done. And, you know, it's just the structured environment, and the fact that they're ready, and they're not used to waiting, and they're not used to being told to wait.
I know. That's so
that
bad.
was a little rough.
So bad. They wanted to come up right away, and I was like, you can't come up. In fact, I can't talk to you right now. Like, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to give me 2 minutes here.
And you know, Ron, who's a former sheriff, I could hear it in his voice when we're telling him, no, you sit, you don't do anything, you stay tight. Well, the sergeant said, you stop, you tell him. And I can see him being in his position going, boy, I got to tell the sergeant he can't do this right now. That's probably not going to go well. But
I was like, handle it, Ron. Handle it, because I can't deal with it right now.
exactly,
You got to handle down
exactly.
there for me.
So yeah, Ron was able to keep the team at bay, the eager team down there, and I'll tell you, man, those
And then
guys,
you
those
took
guys
care of
and
Chris.
ladies,
Yeah,
they
and then
were
you took care of Chris.
amazing. Yeah.
So
And
we probably should wrap this up. I mean, we've
Yeah.
covered a lot of the what happened and the why. It's important to know that a lot of people put a lot of energy into this. There were multiple teams. Obviously, you, Mike, were critical. Our team was phenomenal. Veronica and Heather and Miles, they put a lot of effort in to find somebody to get these dogs off the mountain, and we have to commend them for that. It's really important to do that. The search and rescue team, the Montrose guys, were instrumental. They were helping them, and there are some other people that were out there who did see the dogs, tried to feed them early on, even before we got involved, that cared about the dogs. And then there was a lot of people that came and helped us along the way with things that we might need, donations for the food and the water. That was great. And it was a big feat for a lot of people to take on. But
and the funny thing is that one of the things I think that I look at, when you see the news clips and all that, it seems like a glorious, quick, spectacular event, but nobody gets into the details. I mean, that nobody understands the details as we've kind of described.
Wasn't
But
quick.
one of the other things that never occurs to anybody, I think, are the costs involved in this.
Right.
And if you look at the physical cost just of Joanne's team going up that hill and getting up there and doing what they did and having to buy some incidentals, then you look at the cost of the recovery effort. You got 14 members of a search and rescue group and sheriff's department and that sort of thing. There are absolute tangible costs of this, all because somebody very likely decided they didn't want those dogs anymore or couldn't sell them, and so they toss them out in the woods. But beyond that, now you've got extensive vetting. You've got training that's going to have to happen. I mean, the cost is unbelievable. That's what nobody understands. Nobody ever gets.
Right. I mean, our team alone probably will be in this around $1,500 easy, just up to Monday. That's just up to the rescue point. And that doesn't count other people that were not on our team. That doesn't count Veronica and Heather and Miles' gas when they drove up, or the food they brought, or yours, Mike. It doesn't count anything that you've spent to come up there. It doesn't count anybody else that was going up there. So there is a lot of money that does get spent. And then, there's going to be a lot more money spent on these dogs by the people that are going to be taking care of them. And, and I just want to say, that we have to remember that they could be lost dogs. We are not ruling that out. It's always a possibility. In our vast experience, it's probably highly unlikely that these three have an owner somewhere. But we're going to search. We're going to check them for chips. We haven't done that yet. As you can see, even today, they're skittish. The wind blows. It scares them. I move the bowl too fast. It scares them. They're making, good progress, but this is a slow decompressing period for them. So they're going to need some training. They're going to need some other things, but we're going to look and see, if there's an owner out there. We'll scan them as soon as we can. We're comfortable with that. Right now they're being, treated. They're getting some deworming medication. They're going to get, flea and tick stuff, which we haven't seen anything on them, but we haven't really been close enough to really see, because we don't want to traumatize them anymore. I mean, they've been off the mountain 24 hours. So, 36 hours or whatever it is now. So they're going to need, they're going to need some other things as we move along here. Health-wise, they appear to be healthy. We're running, stool samples. We're going to treat them for anything they might have, if there's any parasites or anything. But, we had one of our mobile vets here today, and he checked on them. It's better to check on them here. It's less traumatizing than to drag them into a vet's office right now. Entail putting them and loading them up in crates and doing all of that again. So he came out to check on them. They're definitely underweight, and malnourished, but they are definitely getting regular feeding schedules. We're adding protein. The treats that you're seeing are really, good food, solid food for them as well. The food's just getting regular for them again, because we did feed them a lot of different things when we were out there, just because we had to entice them with different things. So, to move on to where they're going to, we have, I'd like to see if you could see them again. But right now they're going to decompress for a while, and we're going to keep them here, several more days or a week, however long it's going to take for that. We're going to do that, and then we do have 3 amazing rescues who actually Veronica secured from the get-go. Basically, Paws for Life, I Stand with My Pack, and Deity Animal Rescue are each taking on the responsibility of taking care of these animals, and making sure that they find forever homes if no owners are found. They're going to be on a stray hold. It's
Right.
LA County. It's 14-day stray hold. So, we have to do that. That's important.
Yep.
So we'll do that. They Pause for Life has agreed to pay for their training. They will most likely go into a really great training program together at a separate location.
Nice.
So they're going to be doing that. I know that they got a couple of angel grants from Stand Up for Pit Bulls. They gave them like a $500 to each of the rescues to help with whatever they might need. I mean, they're going to need medical. George is going to have eye surgery. They're all going to need to be, spayed and neutered and have all their shots and all their training. So they're going to get everything they need from those, 3 rescues that are going to take care of them. We'll update everybody on that. They will be available for adoption. There's a lot of people saying, oh, they should be adopted together. They should go to the same home. That sounds fabulous, but that's not always practical. It's not always easy, and it's not always for the best interest of the dogs. We don't know. We assume these dogs are related in some fashion, whether George and Stevie are siblings and maybe Gracie is a mom. We're not really seeing that indication that she's a mom yet, but they're related in some fashion. They may be all siblings, but there's a lot of discussion, and we're not going to argue that discussion. We're going to support whatever the rescues decide after they've had time to spend time with the dogs, go through training, see what their needs are, see what families they should be placed with. If they decide the dog needs to be placed with a sibling or the other dog, they're going to do whatever is best for the dogs. So, everyone should stand by. We're going to have some, we'll have information for the rescues. We'll put it up on our page. And if you are interested in adopting, when they do become available, we'll tell you who's got what dog, and you can reach out to that particular rescue with your information. We even know that, one of the search and rescue guys from Montrose is interested. So, these dogs are going to have good, loving homes no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
They're happy now, and they're off the mountain. They're out of the elements, that they were in. So, Nikki, what else? Is there anything we're forgetting? There were some bullet points. I don't know if there's anything.
I think we covered most of it, but I'll throw some out there in case they trigger anything. So
Okay.
I think we pretty much covered like what was different about this rescue as opposed to others. That could open up a whole other discussion, but clearly the amount of work that went into it. Huh?
Snow.
No, in Southern California. COVID is not usually involved in most of the rescues. 3
Correct.
Yeah, that's true.
mountains.
The steep terrain where the enclosure had to be put was very unique.
Yeah. A Missy trap that had how many 6x6 panels?
13.
14.
13
Well, yeah,
total.
13.
13 and
Yeah.
an extra that was a protector for the door.
Yeah.
14 total.
So many things. It's just I wanted to ask, like, what would you do differently? What went well? What didn't go well? And what did you learn? But that might open up even more discussions that get too deep. And I think you guys covered a lot of that kind of stuff.
I think the reality is, as far as like what would we do different,
Mhm.
I would honestly say nothing.
Right.
I think that ultimately, now a lot of things could have happened, but the dedication that Joanne and her crew had doing exactly as we had planned, and she and I had discussed on the phone, that part of it was executed flawlessly. And that was what really enabled us to move these dogs 600 feet higher up a mountain. Bottom line is, it went so well. It went perfectly according to plan, except for an injury.
Right.
It couldn't have been better.
Well,
And it was based on our over planning.
and
being
you
prepared for
the
anything.
adversary, like you plan as well as you can, right? And then this challenge comes in you didn't expect with hurt other people, noise, and a frantic energy that comes with that, sirens,
Yeah.
a lot of urgency around that. That could have that moment when that happened could have shut you guys down. And
Yeah, we did have the
It could have.
sirens went off, and thankfully it didn't. I mean, these, thankfully it didn't affect us in a negative way. There was, things that
Yeah.
happened that came up.
And
I
those
mean,
would be things that were out of control anyway. There's only so much
Right.
that you have control over.
Right.
And I think
They
that,
heard a truck down the road, remember, Mike? And they
right.
scattered.
Yeah.
The truck down the road.
Yeah, it was like a front end loader was scooting something, made a bang, and I thought we were done.
So
So
the terrain, the weather, those things.
And then I'd like to bring some stuff up that might seem rescue 101, but for people who really aren't involved in rescue, or who maybe just network, or they want to get involved, there's so many aspects to it. So, it's like there's all these different pieces of rescue, and rescue is it's a heading for a lot of different sections of it. So it's like you guys have your part and your expertise of what you do, and a lot of people think, oh, once we get the dog safe, then they breathe. Like, yeah, they're safe. Now the work is just done. And so what do you do after that? And you guys have talked about that, but I want to highlight how important it is to really understand the amount of commitment that goes into the follow-up, to not fail a dog and to see them all the way through. Like, the rescue has not ended. So even though they're going to go off to rescue groups, and then those rescue groups will take them through whatever they need to do to get to where they're going to be ready for a home. But making sure that they get lined up with the right next step, so that there is no hole in the process,
right,
or you fail the dog. And there's still things that you cannot control. You set them up for success as best you can. And, you guys are so incredibly responsible with your integrity and your intentions of making sure that these things are done right. They're done with the safety of the dog and everyone involved, is the utmost importance. And the follow through there, making sure that if a dog does have a home where someone's missing it, that they have the opportunity to be united. I really commend the steps that both Joanne, you and your entire group, Dog Day Search and Rescue, and Mike Noon, who you work with different groups, but independent operator sort of in a way, make sure that your integrity is always laced throughout everything you do. I mean, it's like the infinity symbol. And some people don't realize how important that is and how much is involved. Like, I got a dog out of the shelter, cool, it's safe. It's like, no, that's the beginning,
Yeah. We try to make sure that the animal is taken care of the whole way. I mean, we do adopt out some animals, that ourselves directly, and we do home checks. We do a lot of, wellness checks. We make sure that the animals are healthy, that they don't get abandoned, they don't get forgotten. We look for owners. Sorry, it's getting loud here. I don't know if you can.
Yeah, that's right.
But we do make sure that we follow through, and we have a dedicated team. Our team is really passionate about what we do, and other people that help, that want to help, should volunteer for rescue organizations. Go foster, go walk dogs, go sit with dogs, go do home checks, do whatever you can to help other people, because the rescues that are out there working hard are doing exactly what you said. It's not just us, but a lot, we're happy to work with the rescues, and usually we'll only work with the rescues that are doing all of the right integrity steps. They're screening the applicants, they're making sure it's the right fit for the dog, they're not afraid to say no to an adopter if they feel the fit isn't a good one. They are, doing the home checks, they're doing follow-ups, they're taking the animals back if they need to, and finding another home if need be, giving them all the medical they need. They're doing all of those great things, and looking, obviously if they find dogs, they're helping other people, even especially right now, they are looking for owners as well before they rehome any animals. So we love everybody that's doing that stuff for us.
And I can tell you, kind of in closing, this is like one of those do not try this at home kind of things. And I mean, I deal with a lot of different trappers. I mean, across the country, I try to coach and help, and people get wind of my name or whatever. And sometimes, we can do some really good things. And so much of it has to do with understanding when you're outgunned. And this goes right to Veronica. She knows dogs. She is amazing.
Yeah.
She knew that this was way beyond what she could handle, what she could physically do. And she might have been able to catch Georgie, but she knew also intuitively that the other two would be at risk at that point. And so she knew she had to get help. And the one thing that, I mean, I mad respect for you, Joanne, and your whole crew is your willingness to collaborate. And I mean, I love doing that. I love working on teams and that kind of thing because we all get better. We all learn from each other. We all learn to work with each other. And it's all for the benefit of what we're doing, you know, and it's
Yeah.
getting all of those dogs safe. It's not getting two and going, oh, we just never got the other one. Well, because you failed in the first place when you didn't go out and reach out for help. You
Right.
can't do this stuff on your own. I couldn't have done all this stuff on my own. The idea was there, but clearly we need a team and we need everybody being working together. And so for, you know, for other trappers that may see this and all that kind of stuff, I mean, if you've got people locally that are skilled, reach out, you know, reach out to us. We can help. I mean, you can't do these kinds of projects with small groups. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And the
No.
planning is just insane. Has to be perfectly
Yeah,
planned.
and the collaboration, you know, between everybody, you know, and it's not always easy. I mean, it's stressful. We stress out when we're out there too, you know, but
Sure.
you know, you get past it. I mean, a lot of team members put in hours per day. I mean, it was an hour there, an hour back for most people. So, and we were up there every day for an hour and a half, probably to 2, some days longer. So you're
Right.
talking a 5-hour day for people on the team, multiple team members. So
Yeah.
this is a huge commitment from everybody's standpoint. You know, you, Mike, and Veronica and her friends, and our team, yeah, the Montrose guys, everybody put in a lot of time and commitment to this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It just bottom line is it took nearly 30 people to pull this off flawlessly.
yeah.
And it was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I hope we're not forgetting anybody. I know there's a lot of people that helped us in different areas. You know, we did, you know, have some extra help here and there to do some things, and we just appreciate everybody's support. You know, everybody on our pages that was sending good thoughts, and you know, we were really working hard behind the scenes. And we're sorry we couldn't talk about this up front. You know, we didn't give a lot of details up front because we didn't want to risk anybody or anything jeopardizing what we were putting together, and we couldn't do that, so we didn't talk about a lot of the details of what was going on behind the scenes. Like we
Yeah.
just did that. So and that's, you know, had to be that way.
Yep.
So in closing, if you guys wanted to maybe just, a lot of people know who you are, but if this is new for people, do you want to, like, Joanne, just say about your organization, sort of the umbrella of what you do, even though it's hard to encapsulate it, and how people can reach out to you or follow the story. Some people might want to donate to help these guys or to help future rescues, anything like that. Some people just might want to be involved and maybe volunteer. And then Mike, can you do the same? You know, where can people find you? What are your skills? What's your wheelhouse? What do you do? And, you know, just give people an idea of who you are.
Well, I mean, basically, this is the kind of stuff that I do. I particularly like the more challenging ones, the ones that really require the outside the box thinking to be able to do, you know, complete setting a trap. You know, there's a lot of people that can do that. That's not really my thing, even though I own a lot of traps. I don't use them probably as much as most people do, because a lot of stuff that I do is like this, or more catching them when they're on a dead run and things like that through cities. But, you know, I mean, I've got a group called From Lost to Found, and we've got, you know, 2 other people that were co-founders, and it was all based upon one particular dog that was just going crazy in an area. And this particular group, we try as much as we can to help owners find and secure their dogs. And then we teach them a little bit about, well, you know, this is how you're going to prevent these kinds of things in the future or whatever. But most of that team does not have the ability to leave their job, leave their homes, do the kind of driving that I do and that Joanne does. And so, you know, I do a lot of this kind of stuff independently. And as far as donations go and all that kind of stuff, we are not a 501c3, so we don't, you know, we can't take that and that sort of thing. But Joanne is, and Joanne's crew does a lot of work. I mean, they're constantly on the go catching dogs. And again, there's a cost of recovering dogs. And what seems like it doesn't seem like much when you see it on a 30-second news clip or something like that. But like she said, you know, they're in the hole right now, $1,500 just on gas and food and the basics, you know, buying a roll of wire and baling wire and, you know, things like that to be able to assemble all this stuff. And renting a trailer, things like that. They do that at the drop of a dime. They don't even think twice about it. But these kinds of things are not sustainable. And rescue groups like Joanne's need money. They need support. They need, if one of their cars breaks down out there and has to get towed. I mean, all these kinds of things. There's just so much need for these kinds of recoveries. And believe me, this recovery, as much as we'd like to think it's unique, it's not. I've been on a lot of these, not necessarily with 3 dogs, but individuals. I mean, I've driven well over 1,000 miles to go get dogs, and the cost, they add up. I probably buy 200 rotisserie chickens a year at $8 a piece.
Right? Exactly.
The chicken broth.
Chickens
I mean,
expensive.
my God, the costs honestly are staggering. And teams like Joanne's, I mean, they are so prolific out there. They're always on the go. They need support. They really, really need support. And it's got to be there ahead of time. It's got to be ongoing. It's, they can't do this. They can't save dogs like George, Stevie, and Grace without support. And look at the accomplishments. This is just one of, I don't know, how many do you do a year, Joanne? 100?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that number that I don't have.
I know, and I don't keep track either. But I mean,
I don't keep track. I mean, sometimes it gets really busy, and we'll do a couple, within a few weeks or whatever.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I mean, we were just lucky. Some of us during this coronavirus were unemployed, laid off, not working. So we had a lot more team members readily available. If it wasn't for the coronavirus, this rescue would have taken us, probably a couple more weeks.
Yeah, easy.
That's realistic because of the way things would have been, because we'd have to work and we'd have to work around our schedules. But I don't know, we could do a couple a week. We could do, a couple every other week. It just depends on what's going on. And sometimes there's, a dry spell. And there's a lot of things we don't post about. We're helping a lot of other things, like people, other dogs that we don't always post about. Dogs, cats, whatever, wildlife. We do a lot of other stuff too. But, so yeah.
And let's look at it this way too. Had you not had 3 rescues lined up, the financial burden of these dogs would fall upon you.
That is correct.
How would you pay for that?
We were willing to do that. I mean, we would have used a little bit of money that we had, and we would have probably had to fundraise because we would have needed some help. But we were not going to not get them for that reason.
Exactly.
And we're grateful that other rescues are stepping up to help, so that we don't have to do all of that. But we may have to do it with the next dog we find. So we've had to do that the whole way through. We've had to have dogs put through medical, get spayed and neutered, put through training. We've spent thousands of dollars on training, quite honestly, for dogs. Yeah. So, yeah. So, to go back to, Nikki, what you said, I'm Joanne DeColibus, and I'm the co-founder of Dog Day Search and Rescue. Kelly Hill is the other co-founder. She would have loved to have been here, but she can't be here right now. She's working with our rescue horses right now in Tennessee. So we are a nonprofit 501c3. So all the donations are tax deductible. People can go to either our Facebook page for Dog Day Search and Rescue or our website for dogdayssearchandrescue.com. They can, we have, donation information on there that they can check out. They can message us at either of those places with, whatever help they might need if they see stray dogs or they know somebody's missing a dog. We love to help people. And within whatever time we have, we help people. So we have an amazing team, all volunteer. And yeah, that's what we do. We just help people with their lost animals and try to get them reunited, and we help strays. So sorry for the noise. They're walking a dog through. By the way, we're at what we call CARL, which is Canine Animal Rescue League. They're an amazing rescue here in Santa Paula. And they work with a lot of rescues as well. They're their own rescue. They do their own saving of dogs and their own adoptions. But they also are really good at collaborating. Like, they work with a lot of other rescues that will board dogs here. We really enjoy this facility for the dogs. It's a little airy. It's a little roomy. Their handlers are very good with this type of dog. So we knew that they were going to get the best care here to decompress, and that's why they're here. Would we have loved to have put these dogs right into somebody's living room on a couch? Sure, but that's actually not what they need right this moment. They needed a couple of days to mellow out, decompress, Let us get to know them a little bit and figure out where the right place is going to be for them.
Yeah.
So that's why we're here, in case anybody's wondering. And you know, it's a little breezy here. It's cool air. It's not hot. You know, you can see they have a whole section to themselves. If you ever need to board your dog here, rescue or personal, I highly advise coming out here and checking them out. So it's a great facility and great people that work here, and we're thankful to them. So
Yep.
That's pretty much it, Nikki. We've talked everybody out.
It's, you know what? There's the whole story. It's like, and then
They're taking the dogs. Some of the dogs are being going out for playtime. That's why you're hearing more noise right now.
You guys will post this on the Dog Day Search and Rescue. We will share it. So Joanne DeCalabas and Dog Day Search and Rescue and Mike Newman, that counts, like if you ever need to reach any of them, I'm sure you can find Mike on Facebook. You can also reach out to Dog Days and say, hey, we need Mike. So
Yeah.
don't hesitate if you need help, if you need advice, if you want to volunteer, help out, all of the above,
Yeah.
right?
Learn.
Yeah. Mike's a great educator. His passion is educating people on this, so that's in there too. It's all in the mix. It's all about helping these animals, the ones that need help. So the more people that are in the mix with that responsibly, then that's good.
Yep.
That's easier, right? So should we say bye? You want to give us a shot?
All right, guys.
Joanne?
I was having a hard time hearing you. I apologize. I knew kind of hear some of what you were saying. They're quieting down now, but they're all excited right now.
Yeah.
Just give us a shot of the dogs before we sign off, and we'll sign off on them.
I'm trying to do that, but we'll see if I can get Gracie back out. She went back inside. They're kind of tired right now. They need a little time to decompress, I think, as well.
Yep.
For me, because I've been here, a long time today as well.
All right.
So we should sign out.
Show us your logo, and we'll sign out on that.
Yay!
Yay. Okay. Bye, guys.
There you
Bye,
go.
guys. Thank you.
Bye.